Hello, everyone. How are you doing? Today, we are going to talk a little bit about Russia and Ukraine. Hopefully, look at the big picture and the origins of this conflict, what might happen, a kind of reasonable assessment and forecast. And I think we might kind of get somewhere in answering a much bigger question, which is how we should look at Russia and understand the Russian question more broadly. So I'm very happy to be helped out in all this by Master Sheikh, who I've made co-host. Uh, I do have some strong opinions on this matter, and I do have a perspective on this matter, but it's not something I'm an expert on. And so I'm going to lean on Master Sheikh a lot and kind of ask him some questions so that we're not just talking about stuff in, in an airy type way, but we actually get some facts there. So, Master Sheikh, are you here?
Yeah, I'm here, Richard. Nice to be with you.
Yes, yeah, thanks for doing this. I think this will be very informative and fun. So,
How are you, Richard? How everything good in Montana?
oh yeah, well, it's always good in Montana. Uh, there's the snow has been a little bit disappointing over the last couple of weeks. We had huge amounts of snow, and I was skiing a lot, but it's a little bit dry. So, how are things in your neck of the woods?
Well, it's been pretty windy for the last couple of days.
Hmm.
Probably the strongest winds in almost 20 years. So, but it's calmer now. There's a nice full moon out of the window, so everything's good.
Good, awesome. All right, well, let's talk about this. The Ukraine situation is going on. It's been a crisis for close to 20 years, and it might very well have been a kind of question before that. I can well remember 2004 and the Orange Revolution, um, where Yanukovych was effectively a kind of Russian, um, very pro-Russian Ukrainian leader who was, maybe a bit of a puppet or pushover at the very least. There was a popular revolution in 2004. It created a number of international celebrities. It wasn't fully successful. Then we had an almost repeat of this 10 years later, something I remember more vividly, where there was a repeat of the Orange Revolution with Maidan. And that led to a crisis of a pro Western, or it led to a new situation of a pro Western government in Kiev. And then ultimately, Russia annexing Crimea and basically solidifying what was a very pro Russian part of the country. We seem to be in another crisis, and you can tell this by the number of op eds you can read in the Washington Post and New York Times about how, oh, Russia is amassing troops on the border. We might need to, I've even heard we might need to invade Ukraine in order to retake Crimea. Or how are we? I was just listening to a space on how the West should respond to Russian aggression and so on. This seems to always be a problem that's simmering, but it's really heating up. So maybe you could talk a little bit about why this is now a crisis again. Before we talk about how we should think of it and so on, let's talk about what it is. So why is this a crisis again? And then what are kind of like the deeper origins of the Ukrainian question?
Well, the situation in Ukraine has been ongoing now for almost 8 years now, the 2014
Yeah.
thing. And there was some warfare on the east of Ukraine with these rebel-held areas in eastern Ukraine in 2014, 2015. And then it all kind of settled down. There wasn't much talk of it, I think. You probably uh, viewed something similar from your side. There were these news about Ukraine sort of just stopped coming
Yeah.
in. And here in the east, in the European borderlands or the frontier near Russia, we really didn't have any sort of strong opinions on Ukraine before 2014. I mean, it was a thing in 2004, but it also kind of blew over.
Hmm.
And what?
Yeah, I was just agreeing. Yes.
Yeah, and now it has becoming a lot more serious in recent months. But again, there really isn't nothing has happened like significantly apart from the uh, growing amount of Russian troops on the Ukrainian border. But I think there's an interesting interview I watched recently with the former economic advisor of Vladimir Putin, Andrei Ilyanov, and he's making the argument that the crisis now is actually something that Washington and Moscow are agreeing upon. They're kind of playing a good cop, bad cop because they need to neutralize the situation in Ukraine that hasn't been really addressed for the last 8 years. So the argument he has made is that these talks of crisis right now is actually coming from Washington, from publications like Washington Post, New York Times, and that Putin is actually kind of playing along with it. Sort of, they're talking about that there's going to be an invasion. Well, I should make it look like it's happening. I think it's done to pressure Ukraine right now. But actually, it's one thing that I wanted to talk, Richard. I wanted to start off to ask you about your. You mentioned that you have strong opinions on Russia and Ukraine, but I've been following you for quite a while now, even
Yeah.
before 2015, 2016. I was watching your talks and your videos way before then, and it's sort of been interesting to follow your journey through all of this that has happened over the past 5 years or more.
Yeah.
And in recent spaces and recent podcasts you've done, you've sort of I think your tune on Russia has changed a bit. You've been more critical towards Putin, and I just wanted to ask you, what is your kind of take on this whole situation, and have your uh, have your opinions changed a bit during the time? And then maybe we can start to unpack what's going on right now.
Yeah. My opinions have changed. I mean, they've evolved. I don't think I've flipped or anything like that. But I can remember back in 2004 when I was going through my own political awakening, so to speak. So this is a time before social media, but the internet was definitely a thing. So it was the kind of heyday of the alternative media, and I was exploring, um, what I guess could be called the alternative right at that point, and a lot of that was libertarianism. I remember reading antiwar.com quite a bit, or lewrockwell.com. I would read some of these publications, and they took a very pro-Russia line and a kind of conspiratorial line of, don't believe your lying eyes. All of this is fake. The Orange Revolution is completely fake. It's a CIA op, and then they would add in some kind of Pat Buchanan or Ron Paul isolationism and say this is none of our business. But when you say something like that, this is none of our business in this conflict, you are effectively siding with Russia. I mean, if Russia did a full scale invasion of Ukraine and started, putting former leaders on trial and, et cetera, these guys would still be apologizing. So they are effectively pro-Russian, even though they claim to kind of be, you know, isolationist or realist or independent or something like that. And I definitely took that line. I was very strongly against the Maidan in 2014. I said a lot of those same things, and just was effectively pro-Russian on this side. Now, I would stand behind a lot of that. There seemed to be a kind of split in the alt right of the time. And I don't know the percentages. I don't know if it was 50-50 or 75-25. It's hard to tell. But there were many people who were highly sympathetic towards Russia and maybe took a kind of isolationist stance on this of, well, half of the country really wants to be part of Russia. Russia's a great power. Russia's kind of against the American led order. Um, Maybe that's an assumption we should try to critique a little bit, but so we should just basically be pro-Russian, and Crimea is now a Russian place. This is great, blah blah blah. There were others who I think took what is really a worse position, and they were very excited about Ukrainian nationalism, and particularly with the fact that when you look at Ukrainian nationalism, there's this kind of hint of Nazism in there. So you would have a lot of people who would kind of believe, well, this is great. The far right is now, riding high. And I think the response to that was that, you know, these Ukrainian Nazis, the Azov battalion and all of this kind of stuff, they are useful idiots, so to speak. They're being used by oligarchs and even the West as a kind of shock troops of expanding the American empire into Ukraine and pushing back Russia. And so you're going to get duped. Don't fall for it. And I do think that there is many reasons not to be excited about these Ukrainian neo Nazis who are, eager to go off and fight all these bloody pitched battles against Russians and view Russia as the enemy, and so on. I would say that my tune on Russia has changed a bit, and I have a kind of skeptical take on this. I would like Europe to become more, and I would like Europe to become an independent power. And that would ultimately entail a European military force. And it would ultimately entail having a realistic, maybe occasionally hostile or icy, but also more often friendly relationship with Russia. But I do want Europe to be a power of its own and not just be a kind of plaything of the American empire or possibly of a renewed Russian empire, which I think is not a real thing exactly, but is a possibility at least. And so I have a lot of skepticism towards the way Russia is handling itself in world affairs. I think maybe you're referencing this, but during the Syria crisis, when there was the so-called red line crisis in the Barack Obama's tenure, Putin really presented himself to the world as the adult in the room, as a serious actor who is, talking about multilateralism and real strategy and respecting other countries' interests and so on. He was kind of presenting himself as the adult in the room. He actually wrote an op-ed in the New York Times, which became kind of notorious. I think notorious because so many people agreed with it. What I've seen from Russia in the aftermath, it's not like I feel that they're entirely hostile, but I do feel that they have an agenda which is really kind of opposed to ours, or at the very least is not helpful towards us. At this point, Vladimir Putin isn't trying to act like an adult or a kind of Bismarck and writing, talking to the New York Times. Instead, Putin's PR strategy seems to be appealing to Breitbart or something like that, or Tucker Carlson. It's just this kind of, you know, talking about the J6 protesters and doing some kind of red meat stuff on, the globalists are promoting transsexual ideology. Not that that's wrong exactly, but it's something that I think is kind of deceptive. I also um, do think I've kind of come full circle on the Russiagate question from a few years ago. I don't think that, I certainly don't think that Donald Trump is this Manchurian candidate, or so that there's some like grand geopolitical scheme. But I do think that Russia is, through the Internet Research Agency, through other entities, is kind of promoting, for lack of a better word, bullshit in the West. And this actually isn't really in our interest. The level of, it's not just a bunch of Facebook ads. The level at which Russian actors are creating nonsense and chaos and kind of like the worst possible version of the right wing in America and other countries, not so much to even achieve a definite objective, but just simply to kind of create chaos and nonsense and kind of stick a middle finger up at America and the West, is not in our interest. Now, is what they're doing understandable? Are they in some ways reacting to like the Pussy Riot years, where there was a lot of international diplomacy, kind of this PR war that was going on? Yeah, it is understandable that they would have a lot of bitterness to the West. But I think what's also interesting is that it's in some ways like they don't achieve actual geopolitical objectives with this. I mean, one thing that's interesting is that if you look back at Trump in 2016, there is clearly reason to believe that Trump was very interested in getting along with Russia. He had people like Manafort in his inner circle. He's a long time operative and for Eastern Europeans in Washington. He just said as much. He's like, we should get along with Russia. It's a big country. Why are we fighting? Why don't we allow Russia to fight ISIS? Why are we always opposed to everything they do? Trump really was presenting himself as a kind of a Bismarckian realist as well. But if you look at what happened at the end of the administration, it's almost like the reverse of what the media would tell you. So there were major sanctions going on in the end of the Trump administration. Maybe these sanctions had something to do with, we want to demonstrate that we're not Russia's puppet or something. We're going to go hardcore on them. Those sanctions involving like the Nord Stream have actually been lifted under Biden. And Biden is not doing Twitter diplomacy. He's actually doing traditional diplomacy, where not everything is revealed. Your dirty laundry is not aired to the public. And he actually seems to be dealing with Russia in a sane way. So I guess what I'm saying is, so much of Russian influence in the West and also around the world doesn't actually have an agenda. I mean, you could fairly argue that Putin is better off with Biden than Trump. But there is clear evidence in my mind that the degree to which the Russia is interacting with the West is basically just spreading bullshit online and trying to create kind of needless divisions and so on. And so I in a way kind of understand the reaction to that as well from the West. So those are my collections of thoughts. I'm not hostile towards Russia. To sum things up, I'm not hostile towards Russia. I actually have a lot of
Yeah,
sympathy towards Russia. but I don't think they have a real strategic agenda. I don't think they're a second or third rate empire at best. They have a lot of nuclear weapons. They have an economy the size of Italy's. Let's just be honest here. I don't think they actually have a vision for a different world. I think they want to kind of hang out at the, G8 or G12 party, but then like talk shit about the G8 after hours or something. You know what I mean? It's a kind of passive aggressive relationship, and I don't think it really leads anywhere. So I feel like my views towards Russia, certainly not hostile, but they're kind of a little more nuanced now, maybe much more skeptical, and I don't also want to buy into some kind of vicarious nationalism that you see on the right in general. I guess you see this on the left too, where you start to think that Russia can do no wrong. Russia hung the moon. Russia is amazing. Anything bad that Russia does is the fault of the West. Anything good is its own thing. Russia's a victim. I'm kind of tired of this narrative. I feel like it's further self-serving, and but generally speaking, I don't think my goals as as an American, but also as someone who is highly sympathetic towards European unification and independence. I don't think our goals are really in alignment. I don't think there is some big great white world where we're all on the same page. So this is the way I would explain it. Not hostile, more nuanced.
So this means that you don't see Russia as a part of a greater Europe that could arise later on.
I would love for that to happen, but I don't see
Well,
that
realistically
vision.
speaking.
Realistically, I don't see the vision for that in among Russian leaders, or among Putin, and so I don't quite know how that could happen.
And in regards to Ukraine, do you see it more to the EU or more towards Russia?
I think it is a split country. I don't know if the EU really wants Ukraine, or if NATO wants Ukraine. I mean, NATO, having Ukraine, the option of having Ukraine as a member seems to be the match that lit this fire. I'm not sure you want this just totally corrupt kleptocracy as a member of NATO. I'm Believe me, I'm highly skeptical towards Ukraine, and I think Ukrainian nationalism is often just insane. It's the kind of typical crazy revanchism of small little countries where, yeah. So I don't know. I mean, again, my view is much more nuanced. I would love it if a Russian leader, because Russia has to play a part in the world, even if it does have a small economy, even if it does have a lot of problems internally, which are not entirely their fault and kind of understandable. It is a nuclear power, and it's also a country that has had a vision for the world order. I mean, this was the country that was at the center of the Soviet Union. It thinks of itself as a big kahuna in the way that Sweden doesn't, and or lots of other countries. So I think Russia's going to have a say in the world, but I don't see any kind of positive vision in Moscow.
Yeah, Richard, I agree with your points about Russia, that it's sort of sowing division in Europe, and that's a bad thing. And
Yeah.
I also don't think that Russia really has. They like to portray themselves as they do have this vision about Orthodox Christianity and everything, former Russian lands, former Soviet Union. But I think it's very unrealistic, and I don't even think the majority of Russians would agree with that. Russia has a lot of issues domestically, and actually, I think that this crisis right now is one of the ways Putin is trying to deal with it, because there
Hmm.
are a lot of the COVID cases are really on the rise in Russia. There's some social issues going on, and now, well, at least yesterday was the first anniversary since Alexei Navalny has been imprisoned in Russia. So, in a way, opposition in Russia is sort of under control right now. They're being declared like these foreign agents or whatever. But at the same time, I think there's something bubbling under the surface in Russian society right now, and people could be Putin is trying to mobilize support domestically through doing this.
Interesting.
But
What
but
do
I
you think
think
that what do you think that is? Just to
well, Putin is an aging leader, first of all, and I don't really think he has a viable exit strategy. He's in it for life, basically.
Mhm.
We should probably try to look a bit back. When did exactly this current line of Russian anti-Western rhetoric arise from, and when it did begin in the form that it's currently in? Richard, you're a bit older. I'm in my late 20s, but
Mhm.
I'm following history and reading articles from the time. But do you remember this sort of screaming from Russia about NATO enlargement in the late 90s or in 2004 when Putin already was established leader in Russia?
Well,
Or
I remember it a little bit vaguely. I was 11 or 12 when the Soviet Union collapsed and the
I'm
Berlin Wall
talking
fell.
about a bit later, about early
Yeah,
2000s,
but it
2004.
but actually, if you go back to the early '90s, that's a very important point. The Cold War. Well, the Berlin Wall fell in just this completely unpredicted and almost inexplicable and just kind of amazing fashion, and it did create a kind of new world. Again, we should remember there were people like Thatcher and so on who were very opposed to German reunification. They saw that as just like a reinstitution of the Third Reich and so on. There were a lot of, you had a lot of conservatives who had been for decades been saying, roll back the Soviet Union, free them all, or so on. Then you had realists like Jim Baker and George Herbert Walker Bush, who were a little bit skeptical of that and were a little bit afraid of the Soviet Union going away and creating a vacuum. And Jim Baker promised his counterpart in Moscow something to the effect NATO won't enlarge one more inch. He used language to that effect.
Yeah,
And
Richard, but that was in 1990 when
yeah,
I don't think anyone was imagining at that time that the Soviet Union would actually disevolve in the way it did a year later.
yes, no, I mean it was a remarkable, chaotic moment of time. And then, we go through the 90s, you have a lot of chaos in Russia, rapid liberalization, rapid Americanization, and it was a social catastrophe, the end of that empire. I mean, no question. I think in the 2000s, there was Russia felt a bit betrayed. They felt humiliated by the 90s, but I wouldn't really describe them as kind of anti-Western. Um, by once we got into the Obama era, we did see this kind of neo Cold War arise. And I'll use, Pussy Riot as a kind of example of this, where you had this, you know, grotesque feminist rock group, doing all sorts of nonsense, running around grocery stores naked and frolicking with frozen turkeys and things like that, and putting on horrible rock music. And, it was clearly a kind of affront to Russia. And it was that kind of soft power, American soft power, the rainbow power, you could say, of we are going to revolutionize your society through gay pride parades, through feminism, through sex and pop culture, etc. And Russia kind of, very understandably reacted against that. There were a number of almost like neo Cold War battles in Syria, in Libya, etc., where the West and Russia were on opposite sides of things. And I do think that yeah, I mean, there's moments. I mean, Hillary Clinton famously wanted to press the reset button on American-Russian relations when she was Secretary of State. So there are kind of moments of outrage. I think that Medvedev period was a kind of, warming to the West period. But they have seemingly been at loggerheads, and been at loggerheads kind of culturally to a point that I don't think there's any way out of it. And even now, I mean, there's serious talk of removing Russia from SWIFT, from international banking, and so I mean,
Not
I don't.
anymore. They changed it now. They don't.
Okay,
They aren't considering it right now.
okay,
That's
but
sort
at
of the
least,
news of the last few days. That those
yeah,
sanctions probably won't be as powerful as they originally thought.
right. But there was at least a kind of hint of like a really divided world, a kind of a new Cold War, where it would be very difficult to travel to Russia. It'd be very difficult to communicate with Russians, and so on. It's remarkable. But yeah. Anyway, I'm kind of rambling here. You can pick up on any of those threads.
Yeah. First of all, kind of addressing the Ukrainian nationalism and the so-called Nazis there. It's
Hmm.
actually a very small, marginal minority there, and the Russian media sort of like to play it up and to blow it up more than it actually is,
Hmm.
to like portray Ukraine as if fascism is or Nazism is being reborn in Ukraine, and that's actually a kind of tactics they often use against my country and other countries in the region, even
Yeah.
though it's actually very far from the truth. I mean, yes, there are these hardcore nationalist elements, but I don't really think they have any power or influence here. So it's more of a kind of a center right political thing in Eastern Europe, and we don't really see ourselves. Previously, you've said about some things about petty nationalism. Well, maybe those are things in places like Poland and Hungary, but certainly not here, where we sort of see ourselves as a part of Europe, as a
Hmm.
greater Europe, and the collapse of the Soviet Union was in a way homecoming to us because, well, at least the region where I'm from has been historically more connected with Germany and Sweden through trade since the Middle Ages. So if you look at historic maps and you maybe see that, well, we're colored in the same color as Russia or the lines go here, I think that's sort of a broad stroke kind of maybe even autistic way to view history and influence
Hmm.
here, because even though you could see in historical maps that Russia kind of owns this region, including Finland as well, it really had old German or Swedish aristocracy actually running the show and being sort of stewards of this region here.
Hmm.
So that's my take on this maybe deeper historical views about Russia and their historic lands. So I think that's
Interesting.
something that nobody actually on the right, in the Western right, ever talks about because they don't really know anything about this. So I hope this platform sort of helps to bring this message across some more.
Yeah, yeah, we don't know a lot about it, and I think we project our own fantasies and hopes and dreams onto these foreign conflicts that we might have read some headlines in the Washington Post, but we don't really know what's going on at a deep level. That's definitely
Yeah.
true.
Maybe going back to the collapse, so-called collapse of the Soviet Union, because I would actually make the argument that in places like Belarus, Ukraine, until recently, and also Central Asia, Kazakhstan, and some countries in the Caucasus, the Soviet Union really never sort of collapsed in the way you might think it did. Russia still remained like the most important thing there, like the big kahuna there.
Hmm.
And these kind of crypto Soviet regimes that have ruled there for all this time, there's really not a big difference for people on the ground there. And I think a lot of people are sort of getting tired of it. And they maybe, in the case of Ukraine, they maybe saw what happened to the Baltics. We sort of got out of this Russia's influence and joined NATO and EU. and they sort of want to do the same thing because they're just tired of these old, literally old leaders who are basically almost dying,
Yeah.
uh, being ruled by them and their families and these very corrupt regimes. So I think that's one aspect how you should look at it. Also,
Yeah, very understandable. I mean, a lot of the aspects of the Maidan were synthetic, but there probably is a lot of it that was quite organic in the sense of just being fed up with the
I think that
expectations of a Soviet
these
economy.
protests and knowing the history of my region, they are organic, and later on, when it kind of looks like they could have some get some power or they could change something, only then the West kind of intervenes and starts supporting them. So
Hmm.
at first, it's always kind of you're on your own. That was the thing with the Baltics during the Soviet and Russian occupation, that we were sort of left out in the cold, and because prior to the Second World War, there kind of were like vague Western guarantees that, similarly to Poland, which started the Second World War, but afterwards. It's sort of the West really didn't care, and they only started caring afterwards when things really started to move. That's when
Hmm.
they sort of moved in. So I wouldn't look at these so-called color revolutions as something that's being instigated by the CIA. The West maybe joins in later when they see that there might be some potential there.
Right.
And to talk about how Russia perceives the West, I think that there was actually a certain optimism when Putin came to power in 2000. I remember, I remember, and I've read about Putin actually talking about that. Well, maybe Russia could actually also join NATO. And
Hmm.
during the aftermath of 9/11, Russia actually sort of supported George W. Bush and America in their war against terror, and kind of allowing America and NATO to use the Russian airspace when they flew to Afghanistan and things like that. And I think the biggest change happened around 2006, 2007. There's this notorious speech Putin gave at the Munich Security Conference then,
Hmm.
where he sort of started to talk about how West is bad, and that was really the turning point. And that actually has a lot to do with the domestic situation at the time, because at the time, in Russia, the first really major anti-government protests were taking place against Putin, and the first these maybe you heard about these assassinations in Russia,
Yeah.
assassinations of journalists, the assassination of this Russian defector Litvinenko in Britain, I think, and that's where it started to go. And I think to kind of consolidate power domestically, Putin kind of turned out and started blaming the West for it.
So
And
you
that's
think that might have, it's your position that that is the origin of the kind of anti-Western talk and what was basically domestic instability
yeah.
and not
Yeah,
necessarily like
because
CIA black ops.
around 2006, it became clear that Putin really did no longer have like an exit strategy, because he was in too deep with these shady things that he's doing, the embezzlement of public funds, the war crimes in Chechnya, and if he would leave office, there would be some sort of he would maybe go to trial or have the Ceausescu treatment or
Yeah.
something of that sort. And he sort of understands that he cannot lose power, and he's sort of in it for life now. And my biggest worry actually would be about what happens to Russia after Putin, because I don't really see. Maybe behind the scenes he's sort of prepping his successor, but I don't really think it's the case. Really,
Hmm.
he kind of tried to do it with Medvedev, but Medvedev failed him Um, I think the biggest problem with Medvedev was that he was trying to be more sort of liberal or reforming.
Yeah.
The Libya thing in 2011 happened actually because of a UN Security Council resolution, which Russia did not veto under Medvedev, and I think Putin didn't like that. And of
Hmm.
course, the consequences are well known, especially in America with the Benghazi thing and all of that.
Yeah.
And I think he really maybe at the beginning he didn't view himself as this indispensable leader, but as time goes on, he has consolidated power, and the people in his circle are kind of convinced him that he needs to stay, and he has started himself to believe that he's this chosen Russian leader who could maybe regain Russia's glory or something like that of the sorts. So I think that's an aspect which hasn't really been looked upon in the Western right, particularly this angle.
Hmm.
I think we should think
And
maybe.
so you have all these Russia files who are again kind of projecting their own fantasies onto Russia, saying like,
Yes,
"Oh,
exactly, exactly.
it's
It's
turning
sort of
against
what the
modernity."
American conservatives are doing with Israel. They
Yeah.
see, they wish they would be able to like suppress and kill brown people, but they can't. So they support Israel, and in the same with Russia. You know, somebody in the West like wants to be like imperial or something, like have a strong leader, and they sort of project their fantasies on Russia and Putin.
Yeah. Well, this is fascinating. So before we start taking questions, I'll let some other people in. Were seeming to poo-poo this current crisis.
Yeah,
Um,
I think it's really overblown.
okay.
There's a lot of war hysteria, and I think certainly living on the Russian borderlands, I don't really, for now at least, the situation could change, but I don't feel that like the Russian tanks are coming or anything like that. I think it's more of an instrument how to pressure the international community to get what he wants, what Putin wants. And I think what he really wants is for Ukraine to implement the Minsk Accords, which would sort of give the eastern part of Ukraine some sort of a saying in Ukrainian domestic affairs, and sort of they would have veto power on their alignments, so to speak. So they could veto, for instance, Ukraine's NATO or EU aspirations. But there's also one other aspect. The New York Times had this article about reasons why Ukraine can't be a NATO country because they're maybe not liberal enough. They were sort of dancing around these terms that, well, there's corruption, it's not liberal enough,
Yeah.
it's not transparent enough, and they sort of, yes, it's correct, but they sort of don't admit the real reason why Ukraine wouldn't be admitted into NATO, or Georgia as well, because one of the general principles of any of these larger international organizations like the EU and like NATO is that a country needs to have territorial integrity, undisputed territorial integrity. They cannot have like separatist loose ends or anything like that, because then NATO and EU would have to deal with that.
Right.
So as far as Ukraine goes, I don't really see it being a NATO country for at least 10, 20 years. It also depends on what happens with Russia and Putin after Putin, maybe then. But again, it's very difficult to tell at this point.
Huh. Do you think seizing or annexing Crimea was what was part of that? It was to give
Yes,
Russia a foothold.
that's exactly the reason why Russia is doing what they're doing. That's sort of an
Yeah.
instrument how to block countries from taking this European integration route. And there's actually this term called frozen conflict. You should probably look it up. And
Huh.
there's actually various frozen conflicts in the post-Soviet space. One being Transnistria, which is this breakaway region of Moldova, which actually still has a communist hammer and sickle in its flag, and there's like 1,500 Russian troops there. and it's like where very it's almost on the west part of Romania where Moldova is.
Interesting. Um, yeah, that I mean, you can frozen conflict seems to be a good description of the Israel Palestine as well. That's interesting. What we have. Um, do you think that there's a possibility of post Putin? Let's say Putin is able to find an exit strategy where he doesn't think he's going to be prosecuted or persecuted, um, and or he just simply dies in office. He is getting up there, at least in age.
Well, the
And
next Russian election is in 2 years, and a few years ago he changed the constitution, so the term is 6 years, not four. So
right,
he would obviously win the next election, and he would be in power till at least, I don't know, to 2030. Some maybe something changes during this period of time, but it's hard to tell, really. I would be more worried about the internal power struggle inside of Russia, and because he has consolidated so much power that when he leaves, I don't really know. It's hard to tell what would happen. That's the
right.
biggest worry that I have
But
concerning
do you
Russia.
think there might be a leader? I mean, there's another thing that you see. It's a kind of almost human tendency where you have a strong man. They don't suppress obviously underlings or mediocrities or idiots. They suppress people who are closer to them, who could be a threat to them, who are rivals. And so you get to a point where there's just almost this dumbing down where there's no, he's a man without peers. That's actually a big problem because you want some kind of continuity afterwards. You want on some level, competing ideas that are good, so that you can
Actually,
reach the best solution.
that's the biggest problem in Russia, because Russia has never had well, to of lack of a better term, democratic tradition where there's
Yeah.
like changes of government, or these various parties that sort of swing one way in one cycle, other way in the other cycle. Russia just has it's always been like a one party state, and that's actually a big problem. I think that's more of a many people would probably say that that's like an advantage, but it's actually this huge
Well,
disadvantage.
it can be both. You could say there's certain benefits to it, but um, America was pretty hegemonic in Congress for quite many decades after Franklin Delano Roosevelt. And, they did a lot of things that I strongly disagree with. They did some things that I agree with, but it was a kind of functioning government. There's some real problems with, extreme polarization, what we have now. But I do think that I guess what I was suggesting is, Putin, he doesn't have rivals. There's not someone there with a vision. And so you get to a point where he goes and he has some, massive sycophantic idiot, take over, or something worse. And it's just he kind of doesn't leave any legacy, because he's consolidated power so much.
Yeah, that's certainly the case, I think.
Yeah. Well, let's do this. Let's let some people jump in. So I will. Bardamu can get in, and Rowdenbush. Bardamu, you
Bartimo
can.
should probably unblock me on Twitter.
Whenever I go in these spaces, I've become like a diplomatic zone for people who have blocked each other, and they learn that they don't hate each other as much, and they'll start to unblock. So if I can achieve that today, that's something. But Bardamu, would you like to jump in?
Yes, I do think it was interesting what you said earlier about people who project about the view they have of how they want Russia to act, and they project it onto Russia. People in the West who I do think is very much accurate, and I do think it's interesting because for 70 years. The Soviet Unions were quite openly with we support the Workers' Party of the world, and we are the party who will, we are the party of the world revolution, and they supported the Communist parties in the West, which had at the moment it is interesting. The moment they stopped doing that, and when Russia collapsed, you have or not exactly the moment, but maybe 10 or 20 years after, you have this right wingers in the West who pretends that Russia, they are really the people who are leading our fight, and they are the people who are fighting for our cause, and Putin is really concerned about how it is for white people in America and Europe, people who have these very weird fantasies about it. And
and it's just
yeah,
he's not actually concerned with white people in Europe and America. And it pains me to say that. I don't want to say that, but that's simply the truth. I don't think he actually has our best interest at heart at all. And some of these anodyne statements about how he's protecting the integrity of the genders and so on is just nonsense. There's also this, I would just add into this projection of fantasies by the right onto countries like Hungary or something. I mean, Viktor Orban has clearly stated that, like, we're a little country and our methods, our regime type is not for export. We don't really want to change the world. I mean, even in the refugee crisis, he was kind of preventing people from entering Hungary and just kind of like pushing them over to Austria or Germany, et cetera. It was not like he was actually leading something. And so many of these conservatives are just fantasize about Hungary as this like great new order or homeland. Like, I noticed that the CPAC is actually doing a convention in Hungary. Hungary is paying for people like Dennis Prager and so on to come over and give lectures. So they're importing just like the worst aspect, or some of the worst aspects of the American right. And it's just this weird kind of game where Hungary is not going to lead anything. Hungary doesn't have a vision for the future. There's actually kind of reasons why Orban has opposition, and it doesn't actually lead anywhere unless you think that we're going to like create a whole world of Hungaries where we all just kind of shut off from each other and have our little traditionalist homelands. It's actually not really a vision for anything. And the fact that the right is so obsessed with these countries, and Putin to a little bit lesser extent, but definitely Putin. I mean, there is a lot of right wing fables told about Vladimir Putin, and I don't know, at this point in my life, I think I might have told these as well at some point in my career. But I don't feel that way now, and I think it's really important that we get away from that.
Yeah, and I do think it's very much what Master Sheikh said earlier about who will succeed Putin, because I mean, people always say that when Tito died, no one succeeded him, and that was why the Yugoslavia was broken up. But the thing is, when he died, he was succeeded by a Politburo, with people who thought exactly like him. It is a bit of a wild card because Putin doesn't have a party. He doesn't have any. I don't really think he has much of a vision other than just being a general conservative who just like the status quo and want to steer his country in a certain generally socially conservative direction, but don't really have any vision for the world. And so I mean, it is a bit like when Yeltsin died, because obviously or stepped down, I should say, because the Putin's ideology is much or how he governs his policies is very different from Yeltsin. But he was also someone who didn't have any, who didn't really know how to institutionalize the power and appoint a successor with his ideology. So there is a lot of similarities between both Yeltsin and Putin in that regard. So it is quite.
Well, I would disagree. Actually, Yeltsin kind of prepped Putin as a successor in the late 90s. So
yes, I mean, he prepped him, but he prepped him, but he didn't really have any But Putin has to govern quite differently, obviously,
He didn't know what he was
from Yeltsin.
getting into with
Yeah.
prepping Putin, that's for sure.
Yeah, exactly. I don't think he would have appointed Putin if he knew what was going to happen. I do think he would have picked someone
But
else.
I don't think that Putin knew as well. It sort of happened over time. His changes. Putin didn't have any like the vision or any sort of foreign policy goals when he started off. That's what I think.
Yeah, I guess that's fair. That he has been a bit of that he has evolved a bit from and become more. But it is interesting how hysterical. You have both woke tarts and neo-Nazis in the West who say that, oh, Putin, he's this like great figure or awful figure. But when you look how we actually govern, it's not really that extreme. When you look at Pussy Riot incident, for instance, where you have these feminists who I think they were grinding inside of a church or something and being completely naked. I mean, if that happened in the West, I mean, these people would have also been put in jail, or the so-called ban on gay propaganda. I mean, these are things which are you're not allowed to encourage homosexuality to people under 18. And I think that, I mean, if you would tell even a liberal that you would not, you are not really, I mean, this is about pedophilia, but they try to like pretend that, oh, gay people, they're executed in the public square in Moscow. And both the right and the left played into the fantasy for domestic reasons.
Yes. I can remember in the Netflix series House of Cards, they actually had Pussy Riot itself on the Netflix series. So it was kind of a blending of fantasy and reality. And then there was some scene, if I remember correctly, where there was this like Russian revolutionary dissident for gay marriage. So it was like, it was like the most bourgeois, like possible left-wing proposal, like gays marrying. But he was presented as this like, dissident, like Trotsky like figure, and he committed suicide in prison. It was just such utter drivel. If Pussy Riot did what they did in the United States, they would no question be arrested as well.
I would actually try to play a bit of a contrarian and a bit of a devil's advocate when talking about Pussy Riot or gays in Russia. The whole like the church protest video that they did was sort of made to sort of bring attention to the fact that the Orthodox Church is really united with Putin's government, which actually goes back to the Soviet days, where the Orthodox Church, actually every priest in the Orthodox Church was actually a KGB agent who would report on his like what's it called in English, his flock of worshippers or whatever, if they had like some dissident leanings. So that's one thing. And about the gay ban thing in Russia, I think it's actually it's done to protect the gay community in Russia, because Russia is actually like one of the most homophobic countries. Maybe in the West, gays are seen as something like, well, annoying or maybe dangerous. And when we talk about like tranny rights or something like that, but it's not really that far developed in Russia. But in Russia, you actually have like pro-Russian nationalist Nazi groups actually going out and killing gays and making videos out of them and putting those videos online. That was a big thing about in mid 2000s, when there were actually these Russian nationalist Nazi groups, like similar to what's going on in maybe you said about Ukraine, but that's actually a problem within Russia itself. There's a huge skinhead community in Russia, and I think that Putin maybe is sort of trying to hide it and sort of trying to protect the gay community in that way, but sort of not to seem pro-homosexual or something like that. That's one thing.
Interesting.
Yeah, and I always think it's very funny as a Scandinavian when I see these Russian neo-Nazis who go around with Viking tattoos, because it's obviously such a cultural appropriation for my people, and I think it's quite funny. Yes, you have all these Slavs with the really white faces and the funny, and who are all the skinheads, and they pretend to be blonde Swedes.
All right, Brendan, do you want to jump in? You're next on the list. Brendan?
Yes, hello. Hi. All right. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I was thinking that I'm not an expert on Russia or Ukraine, but I would notice that when Trump ran for president, it seemed like when the Democrats accused him of having Russian agents work for his campaign, that seemed to be around the time when the grift riot, people like Kosovic and Breitbart and Bannon and Milo and Cernovich and all these other characters, it seemed to be around the same time they started getting really sympathetic to Russia and then reaching out to the real alt-right and trying to co-opt them. And they were successful at it. And it worked up until Trump got elected president. And then in 2017, there was a split again and it imploded. And I was wondering, what role might Russia have had in using the grift right to employ the alt-right to support Trump and then dump them later on?
That's very interesting. I mean, a lot of people have suggested this about Posobiec. I mean, I remember meeting Jack Posobiec in Cleveland, where the RNC was, and he came and found me. And at that point, he had next to no online presence. I mean, I believe he was actually a Game of Thrones podcaster, believe it, as crazy as that might sound. And he was kind of reaching out to me. There was actually an interesting moment where I remember we did the alt-right press conference in September of 2017, and I was we after the press conference we went upstairs to a bar, and in my typical manner I was entertaining some journalists over drinks. It was a very Spencer-like scene. He was actually live streaming that. I knew it. He was doing it somewhat inconspicuously, but he was live streaming, and I've never seen that live stream. And I've actually kind of wondered where that live stream was going to the government, to Moscow, who knows? But maybe it just disappeared. I don't know. He was also talking to me there. I actually, at one point when Jack Posobiec did the kind of like anti-Shakespeare in the Park protest, where he was, they went and protested just basically art in the park. They did a Julius Caesar production, I believe, and they made Julius Caesar seem like Trump. And it was like Laura Loomer and Jack Posobiec. This was at least when I was just totally done with them, because they were, basically saying, oh, they're calling for the assassination of Donald Trump because it's being depicted in this play. They were disrupting a play. And I was just like, all right, these guys are trash, And they started doxing, various DMs that I'd had with them. And so I just doxed, I did it openly. I didn't go through any journalists or anything like that. I just openly doxed Posobiec's correspondence with me. And it's actually really revealing, because Posobiec was doing a lot of butt kissing. And he was also doing things that I think some people might find a little amusing. Like he was saying, he made some reference to these novels written by, oh God, I'm forgetting his name at the moment, Harold Covington, who died not too long ago. He was a kind of neo-Nazi type, lived not too far away from me, actually, in the Pacific Northwest. But he wrote these novels that are just totally, Turner Diaries like stuff. And Posobiec made a reference to the novel, and I was like, what are you talking about? Like, I didn't catch the reference because I have no interest in these novels. And he was like, oh, this is the Covington novels. And I was like, yeah, not really into that. So Posobiec was like far, far to the right of me, at least in the way that he depicted himself to me. And so it was all very, and who knows what Posobiec is or what he actually believes or who he's working for. I don't know. But it was all a weird kind of ass kissing session. And then the second you're no longer useful is the second they start bashing you, attacking you, and so on. And Posobiec has Posobiec clearly has connections to Roger Stone. I mean, that's out in the open. But it was just a weird time where, at least from as someone who took part in it to a limited degree, I mean, I see it as there were certain interests that were trying to get the alt-right on their side. They're like, you are definitely pro-Trump. We love you. We can't quite acknowledge how much we love you, but we know we're on the same team. The second you ever criticize them, or the second you start criticizing Trump in a serious way, is the second that they just, you're gone. You're defenestrated. They cannot take that. So it does strike me, again, I don't have direct evidence for this, but just looking at the way that the game is played, it does strike me as just clearly a operation. And there are clear rules involved. And yeah, Russia, like, look, they still promote some of the worst nonsense imaginable. So it's like, would they want to get the alt-right going to just like, spur controversy and create chaos and division? Yeah, sure.
But also with just with the fact that Jack Posobiec, that's his name.
Yeah.
He claims to know who started QAnon. And he hangs out with people who are heavily involved with promoting QAnon.
Yes.
Not only that, but Michael Flynn, who is sympathetic to Russia, is now like the hero of the QAnon movement. And all these people are in bed with InfoWars. InfoWars are kind of like a useful idiot for broadcasting Russian sympathies.
Yes.
So they're all tied in. The same people who have been sympathetic to Russia are the same people who co-opted the alt-right just to destroy them later. And they're also the same people pushing QAnon.
Yes. Yeah, there's no question. And so this is another thing where I don't believe that Russia has our best interest at heart. Russia, I don't even think that Russia has even like a big geopolitical objective. Because again, one of the ironies to this, which I mentioned around an hour ago, is that, Biden has not been this like on an anti-Russian crusade. And in fact, you could make a fairly reasonable argument that, there was another thing with Ted Cruz, where Ted Cruz is promoting sanctions that were thrown out last week or the week before. So you could make an argument that like Russia, if what they want is like diplomacy and recognition and just a reasonable, way of doing business, that Biden is fine. Biden might be arguably better than Trump. Trump was lashing out at them in small ways. The Republicans can kind of go either way on Russia. There was a lot of Russophobia before the Trump era that we kind of forget now.
And there's also, Russia was playing both sides because they hacked the DNC possibly and the Republican Party also. So it's not like they had one side to choose from. But also with Julian Assange dumping a bunch of stuff against the Democrats right before the election, that started Pizzagate. And Julian
which
Assange
was absolutely promoted by Jack Posobiec.
Right. It's not like Assange has a loyalty to anyone. If anything, he has been helpful to Russia before.
Yeah. Yeah. So I just don't think they have. I think one of the reasons why I kind of, left populism and turned against the Trump movement is that I just see it as this like endless series of grifts and outrages. Like there's going to be 2 years from now, we don't know what it is yet, but there's just 2 years from now, there's going to be another version of QAnon or Pizzagate or another version of the alt-right. And it doesn't actually lead anywhere. There's no end game. There's no real goal. There's no institutions building. It just creates chaos. And if you, unless you're on the inside, you're just going to get burned by it. And so, that's why I just want to be independent and stay away from it and criticize it when it deserves to be criticized. But yeah, there's no doubt that Russia is in some way connected to this. Russia does not have our best interest at heart. Russia likes just crazy chaos, even if it doesn't actually even serve a geopolitical end.
Well, even that green frog represents chaos. The Pepe frog. That was a chaotic movement.
It was. Okay, Nikopol, you have the floor. Yeah,
all right.
there you are.
Okay, thanks. Okay, where would I start? I would just go for the first, which you mentioned about the Russia, let's say, involvement in some kind of American culture war.
Yeah.
Russia doesn't give a shit. It doesn't really give a shit who wins, who loses. Its own like kind of a goal is for it to go on. I mean, that's similar what happened in Cold War when you had the civil rights movements and the protests by the I don't know, be it Martin Luther King or the Malcolm X and everything, where the Soviet Union kind of threw its support behind it. However, if you ever talk to some kind of an old Soviet era Politburo apparatchiks, you would have a really hard time finding among even the American alt-right someone more racist than them. They never cared. Yeah. Like but for them, it's just a nigger this, nigger that, and so on. It just goes like that.
I have to. Okay, we don't use. We're going to get banned if we use that. I know you were using that word objectively, but I'll just have to jump in. We don't use that language, and we're not going to do that again. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry, I mean that's literally what they say. I mean I know them. I've known them since the youth. And if you look at the Eastern Europe, especially the politicians which started the career in the Communist Party, they are mostly now leading parties which are heavily nationalistic, heavily anti-migration, heavily pro-cultural, and all this stuff. So from the American perspective, to kind of a look on it, like, do they support us, or what can they do for us, and so on? Like, no, they mostly just wanted to keep going. But
I think you're saying in other words what I was saying. I mean, you know, the Soviet Union supported the Red Army faction. The Soviet Union would kind of throw support behind Black liberation or something. So now the Soviet Union, or not the Soviet Union, the Kremlin is kind of interested in spreading disinformation and, you know, pumping up the culture war and so on. But yeah, I mean, I think you're kind of saying what I'm saying is that they don't actually believe in that cause. I mean, I agree with you that I'm sure these old dudes in the Kremlin are racist as hell. You know, I don't think they actually believe it, but like, they don't have our best interests. Like, they're not actually trying to accomplish anything. They weren't trying to take over Germany with the Red Army faction. They were trying to spread chaos, and they're not trying to like revive traditional values in 2022. They're just spreading chaos. And, you know, I'm sorry, but I'm tired of that nonsense, and that's not in our best interest.
I mean, the Russia is interested in Russia. It's pursuing Russian interest. It always pursued Russian interest, and it will continue to pursue Russian interest. And that's all there ever been to it. But actually, I had a question for the Czech.
Sure.
Mostly because you mentioned Transnistria. I've always had this kind of a pet peeve in these, let's call it Eastern Balkans countries. I've been in Transnistria myself a couple of years ago. And from the European perspective, not from the American, it seems like we are kind of a losing, how would I say, not like cultural battle, but kind of an outreach that used to be very strong there, especially in the early 2000s until like 2010, 2011. And it seems like the kind of a worst thing that is going on for us is from the position of the Europe is basically this thinking that we have to promote liberalism at all costs, and we cannot. We are kind of pushing away any single regime or the government or even the population itself. It doesn't want to kind of accommodate this European liberalism, mostly centered around the Western European liberalism that even years and years and years been pushing more and more to the liberal spectrum from kind of a centuries that it used to be beginning of the 2000s when Visegrad countries, which used to be conservative, still are conservative, were accepted, no questions asked. And if you think that Russia is seeing kind of an opportunity in this sphere, especially, obviously, it's already quite heavily within Serbia, but also is now seeing opportunities in Bosnia and Herzegovina, especially the Serbian part, and also in the Moldova, which has always been kind of a artificial state, let's call it like that, with half of population heavily on the Romanian side, half of population heavily on the Russian side, and they've been fighting about it since the breakup of the Soviet Union. And what do you think their aims, and what do you think they will try to do there?
In Transnistria or Moldova?
Transnistria, Moldova, and the greater region. So that would include also Romania and Bulgaria.
Well, I don't know about Romania or Bulgaria, but I think Transnistria is sort of like the Russian most westward outpost. They're sort of using it as they could potentially, maybe if they move on Ukraine, they could use the troops, maybe send some troops there and to move from Ukraine from the west. But I mean, Moldova has been trying to get into the EU for years, and they've had elections over the time, and they have had like a pro-European, pro-Western government. But I think they now no longer have a pro-EU government. I haven't really followed Moldova for a while.
It does. It currently controls presidency and the parliament.
Well, I'm not really that knowledgeable about Moldova, but what is the proportion of do they have like a so-called Russian speaker minority there also, or
the thing is, most of Moldovans, like vast majority, speak fluent Russian, and they also speak fluent either Moldovan or Romanian, depends on how you want to use it. They are bilingual by large.
But did the Soviet authorities bring in Russian immigrants?
Oh yeah,
during the Soviet
I mean, Moldova used to be part of Romania until the end of Second World War, when it was annexed by the Soviet Union. So it was all Romanian speaking for centuries and centuries.
I know that there was a time, maybe about 5 or 10 years ago, when there was really this move that Moldova should join the EU and everything, and it sort of fizzled out, I think. I haven't really read anything in my local Latvian media about Moldova recently.
Yeah, it's kind of a hidden country, but it there's a lot of going on. There's been recent dead elections which managed to eject the pro-Russian party from the position of the power, but also the kind of oligarchy of the Moldova is very strongly tied with the Russian business, and you also have this population which is evenly split among the loyalties either to the west or to the east, with very few people in between. But I was kind of mostly thinking about the larger Balkan region. If you think that Russia will try to kind of either influence the events there, or will try to instigate some conflict, like right now we see with the Dodik in Bosnia and Herzegovina.
Yeah, Republika Srpska. I think that Serbia sort of is on the way to join the EU and NATO, although it maybe sounds
NATO will never happen, guaranteed.
Yeah, but it's historically sort of they have a lot of resentment towards the West and NATO. But I think that Russia will continue to use some of this anti-Western sentiment there, especially in Serbia and maybe Bosnia. And if Bosnia or Serbia ever join these organizations, Russia will definitely try to use Serbia as their kind of Trojan horse or something like that within the EU institutions to maybe use their veto power or something like that.
So you think it would be in their interest to kind of get these states like Serbia, with which they have very close ties, and even the prime minister is outspoken?
To use. I don't think they will move militarily, because there's no direct link how they can get through there. But they will definitely, I think, use it politically to sort of sow more division and so on.
So you think what's going on in Bosnia, we can see a restart of that in other parts, like let's say Macedonia or even Bulgaria, in those parts which have these minorities?
It could be that, but that's really the question of the society there. What's the societal mood there? If it swings against the EU, then Russia can definitely use it, I think. But if the social mood is good, I don't think Russia has any sort of power over these places.
Yeah, don't you think that we are kind of shooting ourselves in the foot if we are, especially in last, say, 10 years or so, we have been heavily imposing kind of requirements in order for them to get to some sort of not just legislative liberalism, but social liberalism in order for them to proceed with the negotiations. And as a result, we can see it basically got stuck everywhere. There hasn't been anything major happening since Croatia joined EU in 2014, I think. If I wonder if you think in Brussels they will kind of realize that we are just basically leaving this territory for, be it Moscow or could be in future also China, to take the prime influence there.
Well, I think the Chinese influence in Eastern Europe is a separate topic, but I think this sort of push for social liberalism kind of goes hand in hand with the requirements of having transparent governance and rule of law. And these places sort of have this bad reputation about being corrupt, economically corrupt, and so on. And I think the thing that Brussels really wants is to these places to have like rule of law in the Western sense, and I think many in the eastern parts of Europe kind of overread that as being them trying to push tranny rights or something like that, which is really not. I don't think it's the case.
No, I
mean,
don't think either. Also, it kind of became a meme in past couple of years. And it's not a meme that the Brussels itself or Germany or France or whoever else have been trying to kind of say, no, that's not the case, because then they would domestically be hit that if they are not promoting tranny rights, they must be bad.
Well, I can tell about the perspective from the Baltics, what happens here with this regard. There was a very strong push in the early 2000s that there should be like gay pride parades or something like that going on, but it sort of fizzled out after 3 or 4 years, and it's really been a non-issue here. The homosexual marriage is still not legal here, although some sort of a form of civil unions is allowed in Estonia right now. But it's really a non-issue, I think. It's really a non-issue. And I think there's also a huge misconception in the Western right that the EU and NATO kind of push liberalism or tranny rights on Eastern Europe. I certainly haven't seen that in almost 20 years that Latvia has been in NATO.
Well, you mean the officials, or because mostly that's pushed is not pushed by, say, some kind of a minister or some kind of a general secretary, but via the massive NGO sector?
Well, actually, in Latvia, there are actually members in the government who are openly homosexual, but they're not pushing any sort of gay marriage or anything like that. I think it's a question of how you perceive it, and does the government think it's important or not? I think it's a non-issue actually here. It's not like gays are being persecuted or anything. It's just nobody cares, and it's a non-issue. Maybe some really far-right marginal groups kind of think that, oh, EU is pushing liberal values on us, but in the real world, like nothing is happening in that regard.
In Baltics, you have the Catholic Church or the Orthodox? Because mostly in Slovakia and also in Poland,
and our part is Catholic. The East is Catholic, but it's mostly Protestant.
Okay, let's do this. Let's move on a little bit, because we've been circling around this for a little while. I want to let other people jump in, because but thanks for your comments, Nikopol. I appreciate your getting on here. So let's Rowden, you had your hand up first, so why don't you jump in if you'd like.
Good evening from Russia, Mr. Spencer, or as the locals say,
wow.
Dobry večer.
Okay, good. Thank you. I'm glad you're commentating. You sound like an American in Moscow. It's kind of what it sounds like.
I'm one of yours, sir. We've met. I've been in a
Okay.
couple of your spaces. I was, tentatively alt-right. I used to be an IE guy.
Okay, interesting.
I've been living in southwestern Russia for the better part of 6 months.
Interesting. Are you there permanently, or?
Well, you and I disagree on the vaccine aspect of things. So until something changes in that regard, I will be here for the foreseeable.
I see. Interesting. Okay, well, go ahead.
I like to think that, I'm as an American in Russia, as someone from the dissident right in Russia, I can offer an interesting perspective. I feel like there's a huge disconnect between the right in the West and Russia due to the language barrier and due to the fact that most Russians who end up in the West are inherently liberalized.
Yeah.
I see all of these recent events as the culmination of a decades-long economic war declared by Washington, even before the fall of the Soviet Union. I think if the U.S. cannot come to a decisive end to this and bring Russia into the globalized economic fold, Russia's going to break away like an underdog horse at a race. I have been nothing but impressed since I have been here. There's flaws, of course. The average person who has like a master's degree probably makes $400 or $500 a month, but the quality of life here, despite the low income, is something that is going to set Russia further and further apart from the West as it falls apart due to demographic concerns. The prices are insanely low for essentials and food and that kind of thing. From what we're used to. I'm from Philadelphia. I'm from the East Coast, the center of the shit. And the quality of life is just, unless things drastically change in our country, I don't see myself coming back.
Well, are you benefiting from the fact that you have a American income and you're living in Eastern Europe? I mean, that is a good situation, but I don't think if you're a indigenous Russian, you're going to feel like that's a good quality of life.
The ones who were stuck in the service industry, I absolutely agree. But if you're in Russia and you're, say an engineer and you're making over $1,000 a month, you're living more comfortably than someone in the US making, 50 to 70. I have no doubt. I think at this point, the US is terrified that all Russia has to do is stay alive for the next 20 to 30 years. And the cracks in our society as it comes apart due to, the schisms that we're witnessing are going to just propel Russia into the spotlight, whether it wants to be there or not. Their systems are functional. Their demographics seem stable. The potential in this country is extreme. They're one of the natural resource capitals of the world. Their economy, you equated it to Italy.
Yeah.
But much like the Western economies are drastically overinflated with things like IP, I would say that Russia's is drastically underinflated due to, the sanctions and the trade war that has been going on for decades. And that a lot of their wealth is untapped. A lot of its natural resources. This is a huge advantage going forward. And I think that it's going to play a huge part in geopolitics for the next 30 to 40 years.
Okay. Do you want to respond to that, Mr. Sheikh?
Yeah, are you in Rostov?
No, I'm in Krasnodar.
Oh.
Which is largest growing country, or the fastest growing city in Russia. And despite that, the demographics are impressive. I don't see a lot of non-Russians here.
Interesting, because places like Moscow or St. Petersburg, there's a different demographic dynamic there. I
That
think
was my impression visiting Moscow as well.
I would say that actually, Russia really isn't. It's not the same everywhere in Russia, and of course, there are places where things are better and things are worse. I think you're probably in the more better place now, but I've actually also been in Russia, and St. Petersburg and Moscow are nice if you can afford to live there. But most places outside of major cities, they're really something. It's not very good, and I didn't like what I saw. And not to say that Russia is sort of falling apart at any moment, but I don't really see if how they can like rebuild their infrastructure if they're spending all of their reserves in wars in Ukraine and things like that. So that would be my point. And also, it's very easy for a Westerner to live in Eastern Europe or in Russia because you kind of have a better. The people are treating you more like a celebrity, basically, because you're something out of the normal, and people love you automatically. So yeah, I can't really say that a Westerner can like be objective about Russia or Eastern Europe. You will either think that it's worse than you will think that it's a shithole, or you will think that it's great. You won't have like I think a realistic outlook on it if you don't travel extensively.
Yeah, I also would I don't buy the notion that, like every white and every good conservative white in America is just going to move to Russia or something due to these things. I don't know. I mean, I don't know if that's exactly what you're suggesting, but the notion that the economy is about to explode in Russia, I mean, I have a difficult time buying that.
Um, yeah, I would ask him what's the situation? What's the military situation? Have you saw any like tanks or military movements where you are? If you're in the south west of Russia, you should let him back in
Yeah,
if he
he is
leaves.
actually in there. Oh, I think he left. Okay. Well, I think we've spoken our piece. Let's move on to others. So I'll get to Perseus in a moment, but I'm going to go to John Stewart first.
Hey, afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
Longtime fan. I would just like to ask a question about your favorite European prime minister. As we discussed, I'm well aware that Putin, Orban, etc., if they do have any pro-European slash identitarian policies and outcomes of their policies, it's purely just a byproduct, not the explicit goal, and that's not going to be the goal. So, as you say, they lack a cohesive vision and they're purely just reactionary. What would
Yeah.
you say that Macron offers to our people that as an ostensibly center-left candidate? I know you've discussed your affinity for him a lot, but I've never really seen you elucidate what you think his vision is and why you stand by it.
Well, I
Could
don't
you
think that
expound on it?
Macron, yeah, I mean, I first off in terms of what we've been talking about today, I don't think Macron at all is trying to spread nonsense and division and chaos in in other Western European countries or the United States. I don't think there's any evidence of that. What Macron is forcefully arguing for is a unified Europe that will ultimately have a military force and be a geopolitical player in the world. And I absolutely want that and respect him for demonstrating that vision. You can find a lot of other kind of vaguely pro EU, leaders around Europe. I mean, Merkel was that, and she held sway in Germany for more than a decade. But someone who actually has a vision for a united Europe, as imperfect as it is, you have to have that. You have to be setting forth a goal and not just kind of going with the flow. And so I think Macron is quite admirable in that regard. And he has explicitly talked about a European army. I mean, he has a French inflected vision of the EU. Of course he does. But it is something. It's something that would dramatically change the geopolitical situation.
All right, well, yeah, I think that's a great answer. I mean, that's kind of been what I've been looking for because everyone always
Yeah.
rags on you because they're like, "Oh, let's go for some more." But I find his vision to be more short-sighted than something like what you would say Macron offers because it does indeed lay out a different type. It's no longer reactionary. It's more a change. Um, it's
You're
not
talking about
just
Zemmour right now or Macron?
well. I'm talking about Zemmour does not offer cohesive vision of the future as
No.
Trump didn't either. It's merely a we don't
Reaction.
like immigrants and that's our
Yeah.
policy, which is fine. I have no problem with that. But if that's all you're going to offer and nothing further, then you're going to be right back where you started because you're fighting against a opposition that has a vision. The liberals, I hate to use the term leftist because obviously it's these people aren't Marxists. They're just left liberals that want that kind of thing, and they have their vision, and we don't have ours. We're just purely fighting back against just yelling into the cacophony of the internet about how we don't like trannies or whatever the hell else the issue of the day is.
Yes. And I seriously don't want to be banned by these. So could we use words like transsexual going forward?
Apologies. Yeah, apologies.
Sorry, I have to be the police officer here. Um, okay, yeah. I mean, I think we're in full agreement. I mean, it's like in 10 years there's going to be another Zemmour who's reacting against the latest advancement of liberalism, and there's no real ability or vision or ability to change these things or chart a different path. There's just kind of a reaction to the latest outrage and kind of some vague rhetoric of, America is the greatest country. Like, we never give up. We lead the world, or, we're going to bring back the glory of France or so on, which is good. It can be inspirational, but it is ultimately a platitude. And there's no real ability or vision to implement any of that. And Macron, for all his flaws, does actually have something. So, all right, that's good. You can stay on if you want to add some more, but I will let some other people speak. Perseus, you've had your hand up, so you can speak.
Hello, and thank you for the microphone. I appreciate it.
Sure.
I wanted to touch on the point of Russia intervening into the American political and cultural atmosphere and essentially just creating chaos.
Yeah.
And why this is going to bite Russia in the butt in the end. America today is extremely internally divided. I think there's just no question about that.
Yeah.
And what will work in terms of uniting the population is to have a common enemy. I recall, don't quote me exactly on this, but there's this Reagan quote where he says something to the effect that, the best way to unite people is for extraterrestrials to invade the earth.
Right.
And I think he has there's something to that, because if you recall, the Vietnam War was sort of used in such a way to quell the civil rights movement in some regard. I mean, you had blacks and whites fighting alongside each other against, at the time, what was perceived as a common enemy. And from then on, you had this 20, 30 years of Cold War with Russia, and you didn't have this internal black-white conflict in America. It wasn't so salient. And I think as the conflict with Russia sort of died down, that internal divide just sort of reared its head. And so I think there is definitely a calculation amongst the State Department and the CIA that war with Russia would effectively be good, because America can't be in this position where we're just fighting each other over black and white topics for an eternity. It's not,
Yeah.
it won't last in that regard. And I think the State Department and the CIA realized they can't really meme Iran or China as the common enemy, because due to the internal logic of them being non-white countries, it sort of fails that sort of current critical race theory test. Whereas with Russia, you still get this sort of, great white oppressor. You have someone who's intervening in elections and the culture wars. And so, in my eyes, I think the federal government does see Russia as an opportunity to sort of get out of this debacle for at least the time being, or until it becomes useful again. And I do recall a time, I believe it was 2018, could have been 2017, in Syria. America had bombed Russian defense contractors.
Yeah.
And there was no real response from Russia. So it could be due to American chauvinism, but I do think that there is a perspective, a view amongst the State Department and the CIA that Russia is essentially a paper tiger, that
Yeah.
outside of nuclear weapons, if it turns into the sort of skirmish, tit for tat battle in Ukraine, that is going to bode well for America, and it will bode well even more once you have Russians killing black and white Marines, so to speak. I think that's going to, create an opportunity both on the international stage, but also an opportunity in the domestic stage, where you have, Black Lives Matter will probably die down then. Russia is seen as the main oppressor. America can claim, we've resolved our racial conflict because look, there's someone worse than us.
Yeah.
And
I think that's true. Just to add on to this, one thing that a lot of the kind of like anti-liberal left have pointed out, Jimmy Dore or Glenn Greenwald or Michael Tracy or so on. People I've really soured on, to be honest. But what they'll point out is that you had all these liberals who were open-minded and interested in civil liberties and so on. And then Trump came into office and they became kind of hyper patriots and seemingly like cold warriors from yesteryear. They took on the politics of their grandparents. And we're talking about Russia as this, great enemy towards the West. And we're one nation and we must kick out this usurper Trump. They were kind of fascy, you could say. And I think there's something to that. But what that demonstrates is that you actually can unite this, like, as hyper polarized as we are. We do have at least like some memories of being unified, say, 15 to 20 years ago in the kind of 9/11 era, a brief moment of unity that can happen again. And some kind of war with Russia probably would accomplish that, even if it were kind of limited in scope. Obviously, an all-out nuclear campaign would be, catastrophic for the planet, to say the least. But some kind of, big bad out there actually could be the kind of answer to polarization, where people start thinking kind of liberals can be nationalist if you kind of press them a little bit.
Yeah, I would 100% agree with what you're saying.
Yeah.
The last point I wanted to add is I also think it's undeniable that the U.S. is involved in what's going on in Kazakhstan.
Yeah.
And that's obviously to create another border conflict along Russia's
Well,
border.
I would have something to say about that, but finish your point.
Sure. But today, I believe it's today or tomorrow, the Iranian President Raisi is meeting with Putin to discuss Ukraine and Kazakhstan. And I don't think we're going to see a situation in which Iran is going to be involved in Ukraine. But there's the Kazakhstan issue is something that could probably blow up bigger than what the Ukrainian issue could blow up into. Because right now you have Russia essentially working with Turkey and their pan-Turk sort of rebels to create essentially a coup in Kazakhstan. And the pan-Turks are going to they've already created problems along the Iranian border with Azerbaijan. And so, in my estimation, if there's going to be any sort of American involvement, boots on the ground, in which the debacle gets a lot bigger, it's probably not going to be Ukraine. It's probably going to be Kazakhstan. And that's all I have.
Well, I completely disagree. I think that the Kazakhstan thing is actually over. Putin and some other countries sent peacekeepers, and they sort of suppressed the protests there, and it sort of ended. And yesterday we had this video of Kazakhstan's previous old leader, who was a leader for 30 years, like coming out and saying everything's fine, just go on as you were, and sort of like that. But I think that there will be some protests again in Kazakhstan. But I really don't think that there will be some serious military action there. Ukraine is the thing to watch as far as military activities go, and also Kazakhstan is actually quite isolated from the so-called NGOs and things like that. It hasn't been penetrated that deeply as maybe some countries in Eastern Europe. But I would like to ask for Richard and for other Americans to maybe give a bit of explain to me what's the media situation in the U.S. regarding Ukraine. Are the war hysteria really being roused up that much as it looks like on Twitter, or is it not?
Not as much. I mean, because I can remember 2004 and I can remember 2014, and I would say it's much muted in comparison to those times. So you do see these strategically placed op-eds in the major papers of record, like New York Times, Washington Post, and similar publications, where they're these are clearly putting forth an agenda or maybe launching a trial balloon or something like that. And there have been some op-eds about how we should I think there was even like a preemptive strike op-ed, like we should go in and take back Crimea and things like that. So there is a push for that. But remember, I have seen for my entire career, like the last 15 to 20 years, I've seen op-eds like that in the New York Times and Washington Post about like a preemptive strike on Iran and blah, blah, blah. And it hasn't really happened. So, it is muted. I don't think there's huge public support. I did notice that Tucker Carlson had a quite decent segment last night, basically effectively being pro-Russian from a kind of isolationist standpoint. Like, what does this have to do with anything? Why don't we solve our problems here at home and not go chase dragons off in Ukraine? It's hard to disagree with that sentiment. It's very decent. But again, it's not there. We are not living in a time of war hysteria. And I think, probably 90% of the public is kind of checked out and does not care. And it would be very, contra some of the things I was saying just like 5 minutes ago. I mean, it would be difficult to get the current American public to get into a war frenzy, like certainly we were during the Iraq War 2003, and even a kind of like pro-Ukraine frenzy that you saw in, say, the Maidan period. I just, half of the public is on mood-altering medication, and the other half is, masturbating to pornography. So, they can't be bothered. So, yeah, that's how it is. Very much muted.
Well, it's actually the opposite here on the eastern frontier, because there's a lot of Russian military movement going on, not only near Ukraine but also in the Baltic Sea. And there's been reports of Russian reconnaissance drones flying over Swedish nuclear plants and things like that. So there's definitely the activity is more than it used to be. But actually, this military positioning around Ukraine really hasn't changed that much since 2014, 2015. I think that the amount of Russian troops right now on the border with Ukraine is just not enough to do this full-scale invasion people are talking about. But I think that there could be something that goes on, but we don't really know what. The old saying about Russia that it's a riddle wrapped in a mystery inside an enigma is pretty true. No one really knows. I don't think even Putin knows. I think the decision hasn't been made, but there could be some military movements on Ukraine. But we're sort of getting a bit panicky now as well, because they're planning to do military exercises with Belarus, Russian troops moving into Belarus, and that's much closer to where I am now. So we have to wait and see what happens. in most probably most realistic scenarios that nothing will happen until the end of the Olympics, because I think Putin doesn't want to anger Xi, because he wants all the attention to the Olympics while they're going on. But afterwards, I think that something could happen, some sort of movement. And
Right.
I think the last days have sort of showed. Of course, Richard, I agree with you on Emmanuel Macron and his vision of Europe, but Macron has been very silent about Ukraine.
Yeah.
And I think if he has this European vision, I certainly think that Ukraine, with integration with Europe, is the thing that should happen, in my opinion, and that Macron should be doing some moves about Ukraine. Not maybe show some support for them, not to like leave them out in the cold. At least
Yeah.
do some statements. Or I'm not talking about maybe weapon deliveries, but it should definitely support its European integration.
Interesting. Yeah, that's a very good point. I can't believe I really have changed my position on this. Kind of evolved
And
from where I was a few years ago.
And also this Ukraine thing, I think it's in a big sense, it's a shit test, a Russian shit test for Europe. And it's Europe and the West is failing it pretty miserably. I mean, there should have this sort of stance on Ukraine that that's our territory, short of war, of course. But I don't really think that there will be like a huge Western kind of involvement in Ukraine if something goes on. Of course, they will support them, but there's also some recent developments domestically in Ukraine. Their old president has come back to Kiev. He's being threatened that he would go to prison, have a trial for him, because he sort of made deals with the Eastern separatists, and they don't like it. They see it as high treason. So maybe there could be some political realignment within Ukraine itself, but it's really hard to tell right now.
Interesting. Let's go to Spatial Remainder and then Arthur Fleck. So Spatial, you have the floor right now. Spatial or spatial remainder. Going once, going twice.
Oh yeah.
There you are.
Can you hear me?
Just jumped in. Yes, I can.
Yeah. Can you give me 5 minutes? Somebody else can go instead.
Okay. Arthur Fleck, you want to jump in?
Yeah. Would you be willing to answer a couple random questions that have nothing to do with this topic, or no?
Not really.
Okay.
Okay. Lightning Patriot, do you want to say something?
Yeah. What's kind of interesting, so I think people kind of remember, when people started talking about Great Reset when Biden took over. And I feel like there's almost kind of a reset to the early Obama administration when I kind of became more politicized. And, my parents kind of how I started politically was like my parents introduced me to like O'Reilly and Glenn Beck and how they were like trashing Obama. And part of my family are Cuban exiles. So there's that kind of Cuban GOP connection. And, George Bush's like reimposition of the blockade of Cuba was, it's going to help free the country. And Obama is like, collaborating with the Cuban communists. But there's kind of like a similar thing I've seen kind of like watching Fox News, wasting my time. And there's kind of like a split between like Tucker Carlson and the rest of Fox News. Like he's kind of out there as like the one guy who's like breaking from the, what's the Monitor,
Yeah.
where he gets his like lyrics or whatever. He's like the one guy breaking out and saying, We should probably, but like Biden is like collaborating with Russia and stuff like that. But then like you'll watch anything else, it's like, it's constantly attacking Biden. Like the GOP is like constantly like becoming more pro-war, while there's this kind of fringe, kind of like America First leaning, kind of vague, not libertarian, non-interventionist kind of wing of the GOP that's allowed. But to get back to the point, and that's kind of where, as I became more politicized as just kind of an American conservative, that was around the same time, like a few years, like as you get into the second term of Obama, that's when the Ukraine crisis heats up. And initially I kind of had the instinct of, whatever, I don't want to get into the story thing here, but that crisis was kind of where I initially became more anti-war. I kind of had this idea of American imperialism and Russian imperialism teaming up against the globalists and George Soros and the banks and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And that was kind of my initial, like, I initially was more sympathetic to the Ukrainian side, kind of like, thinking, Cuba, Russia, Putin, shaking hands with the Cuban government. And then, I kind of became more kind of gravitated towards, like, I didn't know anything about, the kind of like syncretic national Bolshevik kind of stuff. But I kind of had this idea of, I'm seeing the libertarian stuff, or like social liberalism, economic liberalism. I was kind of having those inclinations. But when I kind of came into, the kind of alternative sphere, and I kind of, have my, seeing the facts of race and stuff like that, I noticed there was like a lot of very rabid pro-Russia stuff, as you kind of said. And, like there was kind of like people who were kind of more non-interventionist in their beliefs, but then later, like a few years later, kind of like after Charlottesville, I kind of, like I saw some people who are kind of into like, Russian Orthodoxy and kind of like this traditionalism in Russia.
Yeah.
But then I saw people, you kind of mentioned this earlier, but then there's like people who are like very rabidly, like they have no connection to Russia. I mean, I get, if you're changing religion or whatever, that's a, kind of your worldview, but like getting to the point of like fetishizing the Russian royal family, or like getting attached to something that's completely not a part of your history. I have more respect for someone who's like, that there was like this, that all these Western Christians in Europe had their questionings of the Pope and stuff like that. I have more respect for that, but there was this kind of rabid pro-Russian sentiment, which didn't make any sense. Like Putin's going to come in and, he's going to, do all this WW3 kind of crazy fantasies.
Yeah.
I kind of noticed a lot of that stuff early on. And on top of that, there was this kind of, a lot of the alternative sphere has kind of gotten over this, but there was that time period where it's like, if you question the orange guy, you might be a glowy. If you question Russia in any way, if you're like raising any question about this alternative geopolitical alliance, you're a glowy. You're like an intelligence asset. And it's like now the point, like you wear a mask and you're a glowy.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's almost like there was always this kind of fringe, with kind of like, and there are honest people, in this section, but I always noticed there was this weird kind of like almost like GOP agents, like in our circle. Like you brought up Jack Posobiec. There were always these kind of like, I always just saw this weird kind of like, there's comedy, but then there's just like this weird, like almost I mean, it's this weird kind of irony stuff. That's almost like almost like you would say an intelligence agency who would want to provoke someone into saying something silly or saying something potentially illegal, make a silly little joke in public, or like the trolling stuff. That there was a lot of that confluence, like this sort of who knows if it came from Washington or Moscow or other foreign entities, or domestic. But I always notice those that kind of weird, like almost like you got to have this. You get into the club, buddy, or this sort of like almost join in to this kind of chaos, like as you were kind of saying.
Yeah.
It was just always weird seeing that kind of like in this circle, and I was just kind of on the side. Just I don't really trust anything foreign. I mean, I can understand kind of like international connections, but I don't like. I've kind of come to that conclusion as I kind of recently have just kind of seen. I guess you could say I have a much more critical view of what I would see as kind of international. There's kind of like two geopolitical poles, I would argue. Like we're still kind of in the Cold War, and there's kind of Western liberalism, and then there's still kind of like a Marxist international, but it's not. What's kind of weird is like Marxism, as it's like Marx, was like I don't know, like I've kind of seen Marxist theory and stuff like that. There's a lot of weird confluences with like conservatism, and it's almost like he would almost agree with Mark Levin. They would only disagree on like, oh, it's Marx,
Okay.
Yeah,
There's a
sorry.
lot there. Do you want to ask real briefly a question?
I,
You kind of
I'm
went all over the place.
yeah. Yeah. No,
It's
I think I was
okay. It's
I was
okay.
just inserting some ideas.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, we appreciate it.
Cool.
All right. Thanks for calling. All right. So
Can I interject, Richard?
Yeah. Sure. You
Yeah,
can
I
react.
wanted to say something about the topic of this suing chaos came up.
Yeah.
I've sort of noticed that a lot of people in the Western right, in the Western dissident right, who hold these exclusively pro-Russian views, they're also the same ones who are sort of advocating for the collapse of Western civilization, that America
Yeah.
should collapse and things like that. And I think it's very sort of it's a weird view that you would want to live in a collapsing society. Maybe you have something about that, something to say.
Yeah. Well, so you're saying the same people who are very pro-Russian are kind of like cheering on the collapse of America and the West.
Yeah. They sort of
Yeah.
want to see secessionism, like civil war, things like that. The worse, the
Yes.
better. Something like
Yeah,
that.
exactly. Right here. And again, none of that is necessarily, I mean, we might be headed in that direction. I mean, I that's reasonable to say, but none of that is actually going to support us. And you also see these like concern trolling articles from like Russian analysts where they'll be like predicting I've been seeing this on the Drudge Report for like 25 years. Russian analysts predicts the civil war in the United States or breakup or the end of the dollar. It just strikes me as kind of wishful thinking and kind of like a way of putting forth a outlandish idea in the population and seeing if it will stick. Yeah, there is a kind of there's a like I mean, in some ways justified self-hatred among Westerners, and then there's just projection of fantasies on Russia. And I just don't think Russia is going to fulfill any of those fantasies. Russia isn't actually the thing you're looking for. Russia isn't actually this grand answer to everything where you go there everything's traditionalist and everyone's wealthy or something. I mean, I don't know what they want, but it just does strike me as a kind of unhealthy fantasy.
And also, one question, and then I'm going to shut up. I don't mean to get personal or anything. You don't have to answer this question if you don't want to.
I know where you're going.
But does your sort of maybe your changes in your perception of Russia have to do with anything that maybe has happened in your personal life recently?
Yeah, I can talk about this. I would say that, I mean, my ex-wife did take a lot of these positions. And to be honest, I was always very critical because, you know, I would sometimes tell her, like, look, I criticize the United States and I can do that as an American. Like, I was born here, I was born in Boston, Massachusetts. I grew up in Texas. Like, I can do that. But you wouldn't take me seriously if I were this self-serving, you know, Sean Hannity type who's just like rooting on America. America's the greatest. Like, when you are from here, that's the time when you should be critical and so on. And it was like she would just take these wild pro-Russian stances and be also this like victimization where Russia could do no wrong, and then all apparent wrong is due to the West. And it just becomes, you know, annoying and self-serving. And I mean, even like you can look at this with a figure like Dugin, and you know, I do respect Dugin as, you know, a scholar and so on, but he takes Paul's injunction to heart of be all things to all people. So Dugin will kind of sound very fashy on occasion. Dugin will also sound like a interesting, worthwhile geopolitical analyst and talk about, you know, the three ideologies of the 20th century and so on. And then Dugin will sound like a crazed leftist on other points and say, you know, I don't believe in biology, and I support, you know, MLK and George Floyd as the true Americans or something. It just seems to be, he'll put forward a kind of moralizing worldview, or a moralizing in the sense of being a moralist, someone who offers platitudes. This notion of a multipolar world, it's a kind of like, it's liberalism on a geopolitical scale. So it's a way of saying, like, well, we should have these regions and there shouldn't be any unipolar power and so on. Well, you're just using morality in a self-serving manner to justify something that would benefit Russia. You know, at this point in time, Russia would benefit from the United States losing power, you know, at least ostensibly. And so you're just putting forth this like moral theory, which is entirely self-serving. It would be like me saying, well, actually, I think that people who are 6'1" and have brown hair and blue eyes, I think we should have more money and women, you know, just to make things fair. You know, if I suggested that, no one would take me seriously. It's obviously, you know, incredibly self-serving and stupid. But that's ultimately what someone like Dugin is doing. And yeah, I don't know. I mean, I don't think my heart or gut has changed, but I do feel like perhaps, you know, in no longer being married to a Russian, I'm able to kind of look at things and say things in a more critical manner. And I would say this: I'm still genuinely sympathetic towards Russia. I don't like Russophobia. I don't like shrill, you know, Cold War rhetoric or anything like that. And I would, you know, I resonate with the notion of a kind of broad European family, but you know, I also have to, you know, you live in the world as it is, and I don't see those kind of wishes being reciprocated by Russia. I don't think Russia actually wants any of that, and doesn't think in those terms, and doesn't really have any type of vision there's no vision that we could even criticize. It's basically like, let's solidify and stabilize, and let's fuck up America. And again, that's not in our best interest. And so I'm kind of like, to hell with it. And I also kind of, I don't know, I think I kind of sniff out fantasies as well, like we're talking about, of Americans, looking at Hungary as the savior of the world and stuff like that. I just find that just utterly silly and not something I would endorse.
Yeah, thank you for clearing that up.
Yeah.
There's also this, I think, this misconception in the Western right that Eastern Europe is sort of Russophobic or anti-Russian or something like that, when really it's not the case. We have like good people-to-people relationships, business relationships, cultural relationships. Well, Latvian singers and actors are well known in Russia and things like that. It's only this sort of political kind of military things that we're really concerned about. So it's not like I want to go out and kill Russians or something like that. So that's a huge misconception about this sort of petty nationalism or something like that. It's completely wrong.
Interesting. That's good to hear. Okay, let's do this. Just because we've been going for over 2 hours now, I think we do need to start wrapping it up. Did Spatial Remainder, were you able to ask a question? I forgot. Or you needed some time.
No,
there you are. Yeah. Okay, go ahead. Let's keep it consistent.
Yeah, so I think people. Oh, by the way, it's an honor to speak with you, Richard.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much.
I think people in our circles kind of underestimate the amount of influence these Ukrainian nationalists have within the state. I think they form the kind of state within a state, almost like a fascist state within a state. Like these people actually have fascist ideas, and they speak about it openly in their conferences. People like Olena Semeniaka, are you familiar with her?
Yes, I am. I think she might have.
Yeah, she's like
written.
Yeah, I think she went to a conference that you were about to be in, but you got arrested.
Yeah,
by Orban, right?
Yes, I think she was going to attend that, and I think also you might be conflating two things. There was also a conference that she was going to attend that I got invited to, and then I was banned by Poland from entering the Schengen zone. But
yeah, I think that's the one.
Yeah.
So people like her have a very similar vision to you, actually, like a pan-European civilizational vision.
Yeah.
And she sees the intermarrying union as like a way, like I don't know, like just like a way to expand Ukrainian influence into Western Europe and Eastern Europe, kind of like a new Reich. It's strange, but it's like at least there's a vision there. So like people underestimate and kind of misunderstand the Ukrainian right. There's some petty nationalists there, like right sector. That's definitely like petty nationalist bullshit. But parties like National Corps actually have something there. They have actual infrastructure, actual ideas. So people should have a more nuanced view on this.
Interesting. Yeah, I agree. I agree with what you're saying. I don't know enough about the situation to have a strong feeling, but it is reasonable to say that I overreacted to the kind of like crazed petty nationalism that you would see coming from Ukraine, and that there are other people who want something different.
I think that these ideas are very, very overrated. It's a very small minority that holds these ideas there. And
well, that's the thing. It's not about the numbers. They're a minority, but they're a very vocal minority, and they have, a lot of influence actually. And they have this oligarch that's funding them. It's some kind of. He's very strange. He's like an Armenian guy. I forgot his name, but he has a lot of influence over them. And people like Andriy Beletsky, who is head of the National Corps and is really connected to the Azov Battalion and all that. And it's not even a battalion anymore. It's a regiment. It's within the Ukrainian government now. So these people aren't some like random nihilistic, warriors meeting up and just doing raids everywhere or something like that. these people are within the Ukrainian state. Like these are serious actors, and
Well,
you know,
in, well, in Europe,
you may like them, you may like them, you may dislike them, but you have to take them seriously because you know Zelensky is actually pretty afraid of these people. So
Hmm.
I don't know.
well, in
Like
Europe,
they're yeah.
in
Go ahead.
Europe,
Sorry.
there are these coalition governments. So you don't have this one party that rules, and you have to have like this coalition of many parties. And often or not, they have to do this trade-off that they take in some marginals so that they would have a majority for the government, and they're given some unimportant ministerial positions just so they would be in the government and they would be voting for things that the actual government, the majority parties want to do. They're sort of using these people. So I wouldn't really I wouldn't overestimate them as much, actually.
Yeah, one thing, just a final point. Just one thing
Mhm.
people also have to realize is that the Ukrainian right has three factions. It's the National Core faction, the Right Sector faction, and the Svoboda faction. Svoboda is, you know, national conservatism, Tucker Carlson kind of bullshit, you know. And then Right Sector is the petty nationalist section, led by Dmitry Yarosh, and he's very like petty and you know, just basically kind of like a petty nationalist neocon. And then you have National Corps, who is more like similar to, you know, our side, like New Right. They're influenced by the New Right, Alain de Benoit. They're kind of like Europeanists. So, you know, just I'm just putting it out there. Like, you don't have to agree with these people, and I don't think these people are going to be ultimately successful. But we have to just take them a little bit more seriously. That's what I'm saying.
Interesting. That seems like a very fair point. Okay. All right. I'm not gonna hold on. I might allow this Ukrainian to come in just because I imagine he will have a strong opinion. So let me allow P Clipper Clips. You can come in and speak your piece. At least your avatar is announcing your commitments. So you have the floor.
Hello?
P Clipper.
Yeah.
Yes, hi.
So I see that you denounced Dugin's geopolitics. That's pretty good. One thing I had to bring up is that if you
I haven't really denounced it. I've simply called it rather fabulous and you know, fatuous and
okay,
self-serving.
so do you agree with
Yeah.
the annexation of Crimea, the invasion of Crimea?
What do you mean agree with it?
Well, Dugin authored it, and that's his geopolitics.
Yeah, I mean, it is what it is. I mean, Russia has its own interest in that region, and it's going to act in those interests. I mean, I don't have a dog in that fight. I think some of the more nuanced positions that I'm reaching now is that I don't believe that Russia has my or the West interest at heart. And I think it's worthwhile saying that.
Do you believe?
So, you know, agreeing or disagreeing, I mean, it's not really how I would put it.
Do you believe that when Crimea was invaded, that they had a fair election?
I don't know about that. I mean, there certainly is a lot of Russian support there. There's a lot of Russian speakers and so on, but I don't. I mean, I don't know whether that election was fair or not.
Okay, so to what extent do we have to look after the Russian people when they're not looking after their own interests? They're not even, there's no parties against Putin. When Navalny got sent to jail, there was barely any protests. And all of these...
there were actually massive protests in Moscow last year when he got arrested, actually.
Yes, but there hasn't been any recently. So what I'm saying is, to what extent do we hold the Russian people accountable and say, yes, we should kick you off the SWIFT banking system and not care about the repercussions of that?
Well, see, I definitely would not go this far. I mean, I understand if that is your commitment, but again, I'm also looking after my own interest, and I don't have a dog in this fight. And so
Well,
I don't want to go after Russia and kick them off. I mean, for a lot of many different countries around the world, including the United States, you could make a case that they're a rogue actor on the international stage. You know, you've caused the deaths of thousands and so on. You should be kicked out of the bank SWIFT system. I mean, you have to look at this realistically and kind of, you know, think about interest and alliances and so on. So I am not someone, despite, you know, a lot of the critical comments that I've made about Russia, I am not someone who wants to antagonize them.
well, you do
Or
have a dog in this fight because you want a pan-European superstate, and so
Mhm.
with that, you would have to secure the interests of Europe, which you're not doing.
Right.
Which you're not doing that though.
Well, I mean, what can I do? I can simply offer opinions.
Well,
I
at
more or
first,
less agreed with Master Sheikh in the sense that maybe someone like Macron, maybe this is a time to start to lay out a vision of how he wants to see Ukraine. He has been rather silent on the issue. That's fair. Um, I mean, what do you want if you're in my shoes? What would you be saying?
I would say I would oppose Russia because Russia and China are acting against the interests of all European, including Eastern Europe and America and Canada
Hmm.
and so on. So at first, I would just take that and oppose them. Second thing I would do is if you want this pan-European superstate, you'd have to say who is in power. The EU's in power. Who does the
Right.
EU support? EU supports NATO. So I would take
Right.
that kind of stance. And like JF Garapi, he said, "Oh, Richard Spencer, he wants to lead the EU one day." How are you going to do that if you're not even on board with their geopolitics? Like Russia
Well,
and China
I
is
don't
not
think
going to
I'm gonna.
change. Russia and China is not going to change the power structure. America and the West is going to control that. Like going against that is like not going. You're not going to win that way.
Okay. Um, I see where you're coming from. And look, I'm not going to lead the EU at any point, and I think it's more important now to have, realistic, assessments of the situation.
Oh.
Master Sheikh, you can jump in on that. You want?
Yeah, I wouldn't be. Of course, I understand that you're maybe a bit emotional on this issue, but there are certain things happening in Ukraine, and these things, they sort of, the West's reaction sort of is telling. I mean, there have been talks about EU strategic autonomy, that is to have like a strong military presence on their own without America, and things like that. And I think these things going on right now, Russia is testing this unity, and we really don't see, unfortunately, this unified position of EU. There's, of course, strong opinions in the East, and also in Finland and in Sweden, who are now thinking maybe about joining NATO, which is understandable given the situation. But moving forward, I think we should definitely see a more powerful EU in terms of military also. And it just shows how if there's really no unity on this Russian issue, then there won't be any unity on any other issue. So it's in a way a litmus test.
I would like to just say that there has been unity on this issue because all of Eastern Europe is coming together on this one topic of being anti-Russia, and
Yeah, but
so
it's just it's more of course we can like say that we like support Ukraine, and I think that's good. But the real reason for this is that we're afraid of a spillover, that Russia could start doing something here, and we sort of want the bigger EU countries and America to like show some teeth to Russia, that they're sort of standing up for something, because if they don't, well, then Russia can pretty much act without any impunity. So
but
that's the reason, I think.
but also the EU has to support Ukraine because if they're going to be the leaders of Europe and Ukraine, leaving the Soviet Union, wants to identify as European, they would have to support them.
Well, yeah, that's the Euromaidan actually happened because Ukrainians wanted this association agreement with the EU instead of remaining in Russia's sphere. And I think that's pretty sad that some bigger European countries like Germany, maybe France, well, France has been mostly silent. They're sort of leaving them out in the cold after promising them something. And I think maybe we shouldn't give empty promises anymore. That's one thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we should be beefing up the eastern flank, and I think we should building up a strong alliance with Eastern Europe, and which will build us a stronger alliance with Europe and UK and Canada. And I think that's the way forward.
All right,
Well,
fair enough. Oh, go
think
ahead.
that's the way this Ukraine crisis plays out is actually going to show whether it's going to happen or not. We sort of have to wait and see. I don't want to go out and say like how I wish things would be. I would remain realistic and just wait it out and see what happens. And if there is a military conflict in Ukraine, well, then maybe. No, not maybe. Definitely, we should beef up the eastern flank, but purely in a defensive position, so we would be ready if something happens.
They have already invaded since 2014. That's one thing I just wanted to add.
Yeah, everyone knows that. I mean, it's been
so
on the
waiting
news
for them
here
to
almost
reinvade.
constantly, 8 years.
Wait for them to reinvade. They're already occupied and invaded in 2014. There's been an ongoing conflict since this whole time. They've been firing back and forth.
Well, first of all, on the issue of Crimea, Russian forces were already in Crimea. There were huge Russian military bases there because the Ukrainian government had leased the old historic Russian ports, military ports in Crimea to Russia to use. So they were already there. I think it's disputable whether I think definitely the referendum there on joining Russian Federation was a sham, but if there would have been a real referendum, I think it would also gone in the direction of Russia as well.
You know that Crimea was invaded. They sent in little green men, Spetsnaz. They held a fake referendum.
Were already there.
There was illegal elections held,
already there.
And they stole a nationalist country's land, and so that's why I oppose Russia.
Crimea,
Have a good day, sir.
I don't want to defend the fact that Russia took Crimea. Well, I don't. If you ask me personally, I don't like it. But honestly, there's nothing we can do about it anymore until, as far as Russia exists in its current form. And well, there is a point that can be made that it was majority Russian, and there had already Russian military presence there. But is it fair? Is it good? No, I don't think so. But I think we should move forward. I mean, I see no path on how Ukraine could get Crimea back. No realistic path. So I don't think we should remain on this issue. We should look forward.
All right, gents. I think that's a very good note to end on. Wow, Master Shake, this has actually been even a lot better than I imagined. You were recommended. Recommended to me. Yeah, I'm glad we were recommended by a mutual friend, and because I kind of wanted to talk with someone who, has more knowledge of the situation, and I think we actually were able to advance discourse on this matter. So I would love to do it again. I imagine we probably will do it again.
It's getting pretty late now, half hour until midnight. So, but Richard, it actually was a very good conversation. I was actually a bit cautious at first because I sort of had this feeling that I would be walking into an enemy camp and I would be bashed for being Eastern European or something. But it really turned out much better than I expected. So. You're a good guy,
thank you. Likewise. We all evolve a little bit, and I think that's. I admire people. It's one thing to be fickle and to jump this way and that, but it's another thing to kind of evolve your view as the situation changes and as you start thinking about things deeper. So, I hope that is what I've done. So, we should do this again. And this great conversation. Thanks for everyone who listened and participated. And I will see all of you all later. All right. Ciao.
Yeah. Bye.
Bye-bye.